Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
It is an iron law of Donald Trump's presidency and his image management that his staff make sure he is never brought into direct contact with members of the public who do not like him. He does staged events with handpicked supporters, enormous rallies with his most ardent base. If there's a brief protester that punctures the atmosphere, they get shouted down. In the rare instances where he does venture outside his safe spaces, like his appearance on Friday at Benedict College, a historically black college in South Carolina, his people work extra hard to make sure that all criticism will be kept away. According to the state newspaper, quote, students were told to stay in their dorms while President Donald Trump is on campus. The Washington Post's Josh Dawsey reported on the number of students who actually showed up to the event. Quote, 9 students were confirmed, but 2 had ROTC training, meaning 7 attended. Which is why the moment at last night's World Series game in D.C. was so remarkable. The rarest of instances in which the very unpopular president, likely soon to be impeached, had direct contact with the public that doesn't like him much. In addition to all the boos, some people unfurled impeach Trump banners in the middle of the game. So Donald Trump had last night an unscripted moment in front of the approximately 55% of the country that is not a fan. Joining me now to discuss the president's relationship to the majority of the country that disapproves of him, Elizabeth Nuzzi. She's Washington correspondent for New York Magazine. She's got a great cover story about Joe Biden titled The Zombie Campaign, which is out this week. And Sam Cedar hosts the Majority Report and an MSNBC contributor. And since you're here, Sam, let me start with you. I mean, it really is striking. Like, all politicians have managed events, right? It's just like part of being a politician, particularly presidents. But there's almost a kind of Truman Show-like quality around Trump where he just never, and it was true on the campaign when other people are doing rope lines, taking questions at town halls, never, ever, ever interacts with the majority of the country that does not like him.
Right. And this is not exactly a one-to-one situation. He's in a skybox and there's just a stadium full of people. I think it was pretty healthy. I mean, this is obviously an organic thing. This is not a situation where, Nancy Pelosi is standing in front of the crowd on the field saying, trying to whip up them into it. I mean, because that's really what it's been compared to in certain instances, and it seems like a fairly ridiculous comparison. I mean, the issue here is that Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the world, and the fact that he comes out of the kingdom and the castle and gets some tomatoes thrown at him and potatoes. That's just, it comes with the territory. But it is stunning that he's never been able to do that.
Never. I mean, this is the thing, Olivia, when reading your piece about the Biden campaign, and part of it is about how the Biden campaign is fairly different than some of the other campaigns. He's a front runner. He's a former vice president. He does fewer events and does less of this sort of like retail campaigning. But still, he still goes to work rope lines. He still talks to people. He still takes pictures with people. There is still a world in which Joe Biden has to interact with citizens, which is part of the way that we get politicians in a democratic society that Donald Trump never went through.
No, he never did. Early on in the campaign, before Donald Trump had Secret Service and before it was such a big thing, when people still thought it would never work, and he still thought that, they were a little bit more nimble. They would travel, in one car. A former White House aide told me once that Donald Trump used to like to stop at red lights and go hand people $100 bills, which is sort of a weird thing to do, like to go through the drive-thru at McDonald's, and that is what he enjoyed. But no, he never went across to a rope line. He never took 1,000 selfies. parties with people who he didn't need anything from in that moment besides their attention, their vote eventually. Not the way that he does now in the White House, where he kind of owes everybody something who comes up to him to take a picture with him. And he gets very tired of that. I remember back at Christmas time, I reported a story about how he hated Christmas parties because he hated having to stand there and take pictures and shake hands and play nice for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So this is just not what he's good at. And it really struck me listening to those boos, watching his face, that when you're at a Trump rally, there's a voice that comes over the loudspeaker before it begins, and it tells his supporters what to do. It says, if there is I'm paraphrasing, but if there is a protester, shout them down, don't get violent, somebody will come and take them out if you shout at them enough and you raise your Trump signs in the air. And in real life, that doesn't happen. Right. He can't, he can't just hope that everyone in that stadium who doesn't like him is hauled out of there.
Well, and there's a deeper thing here, which is that, he is very clearly, he's the president of his 40%. Yeah. He doesn't pretend to be representing all Americans. Right. He doesn't speak to them. It is such a bizarre aspect of his presidency, this insidious sort of attack on the basic democratic culture we have, which is that he doesn't even pretend. They are written out of the story of Donald Trump, except as the enemy in the fake news.
I mean, that dynamic is not just with Donald Trump. I mean, we look at the storming of the SCIF the other day. Yeah. I mean, look, there was a time 10, 15 years ago where the play was, we have a narrative in the right-wing media, and the key is, how do we filter that into the mainstream media? Now there's no attempt to do that. There are two separate narratives that are existing, and they don't, certainly the conservative media does not need the mainstream media because they have now sequestered their, and that's what's so fascinating about that moment where Donald Trump steps out of that bubble and that stream into the normal people's stream. And I wonder, the real question in my mind is how upset is he today? Is that a shock to him?
Right.
Or is that something, who is keeping him from these people?
That is my point about the Truman Show. Olivia, there was this amazing image of Tomi Lahren, who's a right-wing commentator. She posted on Twitter a page of complimentary replies sent to the president that are clearly printed and hand-delivered that he mailed her. And it just made me think, it is a Truman Show operation. It is a world that revolves around telling him that everyone loves him.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to Trump Tower. If anyone would go visit him there, a journalist, even if they weren't nice, he sent me a note like that. He sends journalists handwritten notes to say thank you. I think it's more just about making people feel special and kind of playing to people's ego because he likes his own ego played too. So I didn't read so much into that. But I do think, I do wonder as well how upset he was today, if at all, or if there is a part of him who thinks this is like pro wrestling. He understood what it was like when he was in the ring with Vince McMahon and shaving his head, but he opted not to be the enemy in that scenario, if anyone remembers that. He opted to make Vince McMahon the enemy because I don't think that he could hack it. And so real life, again, isn't like that.
It is Wednesday, the 30th of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of this meddlesome priest? Well, the exquisite egg dish with the lovely velvety hollandaise sauce is awaiting, so do enjoy. And what have we in store for you today? Well, what did we have in store yesterday? Lieutenant Colonel Vindman testified. Well, gave a deposition, I think, is the proper process. If we're going to argue process, then that's what that was. And apparently, the official transcript put out by the Trump White House differs wildly from the official transcript of what was actually said on the call. And that was reported up the chain of command, by the way. So many people knew about it in real time. And we also know that official transcript, the one that was actually recorded on the call, is in a top secret file, filed away. Because, it hurts the security of Donald Trump, not the national security. But it does impinge upon the security of one Donald J. Or is it T? Trump. Yes, in a, shall we say, a just world, this guy would be going to jail. I'm still not certain he will. There's going to be some sort of plea agreement. You know there will be. So, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, he's an immigrant. You can't trust him. What is it with Trump and immigrants, and what is it about nativists anyway? Yes. Trump's toxic base is down to 26%. And as it gets more concentrated, it's going to be more toxic. So the nativism is going to be even more pronounced because the toxic stew, when it's concentrated that is one of the elements. It's one of the, things that exhaust off of it that can knock you on your butt if you get too close. So we are now at a very perilous point because as that concentrated toxicity is, the base is emblematic of that concentrated toxicity, Trump will be acting out. And he already is. So, we got that going for us, which is nice. What else is happening in the world? Well, California's on fire, and Pacific Gas and Electric continues to turn off the power. Boy, they're acting like a mob don. What is this? Is California turned into Sicily? Jeez. That's the kind of stuff that the mafia did. Well, whatever they were called, La Costa Nostra, did on the island of Sicily repeatedly. Boy, yeah, turn off the power. Oh, you need some water? Too bad. No water for you. Jeez. This is all punishment because PG&E has been derelict, if not downright criminal, in how they have attended to the utility that they are tasked with providing. So it just goes to show you can't have private enterprise managing a utility, a public utility. Maybe that should be within the auspices of government. Oh my, don't say that to many people here in Southern Oregon. Though I should say not everybody is an idiot. There's actually quite a few reasonable, rational people who have critical thinking skills, and they are Democratic voters. Yet the squeaky wheel gets the grease attitude is fairly pronounced here. And since, the more conservative elements, the ones with the guns that determine what is polite conversation, if you say that government should be running a public utility, oh my God, they're gonna tell you that's not polite conversation while they're fingering their sidearm fully exposed openly for all to see. So we might be able to change that. I mentioned about Greg Walden deciding not to run for re-election, and many people are, and me included, look at that as a good sign that maybe there might be some change afoot. But Trump did win in this region by 19 points. So I don't know if that's because people weren't voting. Is that possible? Or is there that toxic concentrated 26% represented here in good old Southern Oregon? Well, just remember, Southern Oregon, when it became a state, was white utopia. People of color not allowed. And if you happen to be here, for thousands of years, we'll make sure we massacre your ass until, you don't do anything. You can't say anything. Oh, you want to gill that fish? Go ahead. We'll let you do that once or twice a year, but that's it. And only for tribal elders, not just anybody. I mean, after all, we're the stewards of the land now, and that says exploit, exploit, exploit. Oh, Kane West. Is it Kane or Kine? I don't know what that guy's name is. Just bugs me. Got a new album out extolling the god Trump. Wow. said that Kanye West said he got a $63 million tax break by just becoming a born-again Christian. I hate to tell you that that wasn't God telling you to become a born-again Christian. And that $63 million tax break only works in the commissary in hell. So, but hey, prosperity gospel says if I got mine, it means I'm blessed and you are not. Doesn't sound very Christ-like to me. Okay, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, we did allude to the fact that Trump is so unused to normal people, he couldn't stay for the whole World Series, that game. He couldn't. Not just because he was booed, but that was major. That was a major part of it, you know. And GOP Senator Richard Burr's proposal to tax college athletic scholarships just shows that you can take the plantation owner out of the plantation, but you can't take the plantation owner out of the plantation owner. Citing procedural issues they chose not to use, Republicans stormed out of a vote on a bill to help women veterans. Oh, and they were just clutching their pearls and tisk-tisking on the way out. And the U.S. Office of Special Counsel has been requested to review Mike Pompeo's compliance with a law barring federal workers from engaging in political activities while on the job. He still hasn't explained why he's been going to Kansas all those many times. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the United States is pitted against Britain, France, South Africa, and others at the UN over references to sexual and reproductive health. We don't want it. The rest of the world does. Talk about pearl clutching. Oh, my. And the U.S. House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to recognize the mass killings of Armenians a century ago as a genocide that was instantly denounced by Turkey. Of course, that wasn't a genocide. That was just a killing on a mass scale of a particular group of ethnic and cultural type of people. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, deftly located by superior graphic design by Tom, I might add, right there by the social media scroll. And our chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, so please do engage. She's right there. Oh, yes. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know, this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting 24/7, 365 for the last 8+ years now has been, we've been able to do this because of you. Though the bulk of how we keep it going comes out of our own pockets, we would be unable to do this without you, and we appreciate your generosity. You know, the other side, I don't know. They have all sorts of dark money in copious amounts, I might add, and our side apparently doesn't. I've been waiting for those supposed George Soros checks since the mid-'80s. I was counting up the interest. If I could just collect the interest Oh, my. I think we could pay down the national debt just from what I'm owed. So, once again, thank you for your generosity. They need all sorts of money, and we don't. We're able to stretch dollars beyond compare. In fact, the price of a espresso-type coffee drink sent our way once a month is proof of that. We have been able to do that because, well, we live within our means, and apparently resistance is not an economic growth industry, but it sure does feed the soul. If not the security, equal protection, and due process for generations ahead. So thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that also, and we thank Tom. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and very importantly, I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for your social media linky pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and also, very importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really, wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's get right on into this first offering here, because, I'm always amazed at these anti-tax zealots like, one Richard Burr, Repug of North Carolina, who has a legislative history of opposing taxes, but, when someone, I don't know, there's some compelling factor here that I'm trying to figure out what would trigger Richard Burr to go and want to tax something. What would that be? Well, Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And so he proposed a tax on NCAA athletes. Why would he do that? Well, if college athletes are going to make money off their likenesses while in school, their scholarships should be treated like income, Burr tweeted. I'll be introducing legislation that subjects scholarships given to athletes who choose to cash in to income taxes. Now, what would cause him to do that? Well, the NCAA said that they would begin steps to allow college athletes to benefit from the commercial usage of their names and likenesses. Why? Because the universities and the NCAA already are. They're using the images and likenesses of those college athletes, and they are making money off of it. Now, I suppose that would be considered income on their part, and they're probably paying taxes on it, but they do have accountants, don't they? Yes, they do. So the NCAA has actually tried to do something that's beneficial to the college athlete, because when you're an athlete, it's a little bit harder to get a part-time job at Dairy Queen. Your days are pretty well packed. I have a certain ambivalence about college athletics. I am of the old school that says, if the athletic departments are running the school, what happens to the academics? And you see what's happening to the academics. We don't have humanities classes much anymore. Not as a requirement, at least. No more. And so like I said, I have a certain ambivalence to this, but on the other hand, athletes are brought in almost like the university is a plantation. Almost. Has a very pastoral aspect. Look at the field. And put an S on the end of that D. Fields. And the athletes are precluded from a certain level of freedom. Yes, indeed. By the NCAA. And now Richard Burr wants to tax them. Wants to tax their scholarships like it's income. How dare they? Well, in the past, Burr voted against raising taxes on people earning over $1 million, and that same year he voted in favor of raising the exemption on the estate tax from $1 million to $5 million. His record is one of opposing taxes, especially on the extremely wealthy, again and again and again. But now that college athletes have a fair shot at compensation, meaning mostly black athletes, Burr has suddenly changed his tune. He may have changed his tune, but I still hear the refrains of Dixie. Cy Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican members on the House Veteran Affairs Committee stormed out of a key meeting yesterday, Tuesday, without bothering to vote on a bill impacting the health care of women veterans. Committee Chair Mark Takano, Democrat of California, was working to wrap up an hour-long meeting where 10 bills were set to pass out of the committee. The last of those bills, the Deborah Sampson Act, addressed inequalities and barriers faced by women veterans. Before the final few votes, a Republican member asked permission of Takano to be recognized for a parliamentary inquiry or a request for clarification on procedural moves. Takano ruled that the particular request was out of order at that time. Republicans could have then waited and used a different mechanism known as the motion to recommit in order to attempt to change the legislation and apply specific amendments they had in mind going into the meeting. But they opted to leave instead because that's so much more visual for the know-nothings that watch Fox News. The audience has never taken one class in American civics, and what they know about American civics they've learned from Fox. If only Nixon had Fox News, things would be so very different. Now we're experiencing what that difference would be. In a video of the markup, a Republican staffer seems to signal to the Republicans on the committee to leave. The Republican lawmakers then stand up and walk out, refusing to vote on the bill, even as Takano continues to talk. Very interesting. You mean like it was staged? Oh my, do they do that? Republicans chose to walk away from our markup and walk out on the 2 million women veterans whose lives will be enhanced by this legislation, Takano said in a statement after the meeting. After Republicans left the markup, the remaining Democrats in the room took 3 additional votes, all related to sending the Deborah Sampson Act to the House floor. Currently, women veterans comprise the fastest-growing demographic within the veteran community, yet their invaluable service is often overlooked and forgotten, leading these women to feel invisible, Representative Julia Brownlee, Democrat of California, said in a statement following the vote. The Deborah Sampson Act recognizes the honors women veterans by ensuring inclusivity and equitable access to resources, benefits, and services, she added. Brownlee remained in the committee room until the final vote was cast. Republicans insisted the abrupt exit was a way to protest the way Takano ran the meeting. Oh, you mean your arguing process? Your protesting process. You know what they say. If you're arguing process, you're losing. Jonathan Landay of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A senior Democratic senator asked a U.S. government watchdog to assess Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's compliance with a law barring federal workers from engaging in political activities while acting in their official capacities. Senator Bob Menendez, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, cited 3 official visits Pompeo has made since March to his home state of Kansas in requesting the review by the Office of Special Counsel. Many in Kansas perceive his appearances in the state to be a de facto campaign effort, Menendez wrote to the agency head, Henry Kerner, whose responsibilities include investigating allegations of any violations of the 1939 Hatch Act. News reports have said Pompeo, a former Republican congressman who headed the CIA for just over a year before his current post, is mulling a U.S. Senate run. He has declined to rule one out while saying that he would serve in his post as long as Donald Trump wanted him. You mean before he goes to jail and you can cash in? Like everybody else. The State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Menendez's letter. Menendez said Pompeo's most recent trip to Kansas last week, apparently at the expense of the Department of State, involved a workforce development roundtable at Wichita State University, a visit to a business jet production facility, and student meetings. The events, he wrote, largely were aimed at promoting Trump's pledge to improve opportunities for American workers, which has no discernible relation to the Department of State. Usually the Department of State goes out of the country to talk about Trump's policies, usually. Since Trump became president in 2017, the Office of Special Counsel has found 7 White House officials, including his senior aide, Kellyanne Conway, in violation of the Hatch Act. Kerner recommended that Conway be fired, but Trump has refused. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, been there, killed that. Over the past few generations, zombie movies have transformed from semi-serious horror to a subgenre where parodies now prevail. Just since the first Zombieland in 2009, we've seen an explosion of the subgenre, even on the small screen, all of which raises the bar for a successful decade-in-the-making sequel. Also since 2009, the stars of the original, Woody Harrelson, Emma Stone, and Jesse Eisenberg, have become big deals, making their swaggering, unassuming, and probably heavily improvised mastery of their roles a big part of why Zombieland Double Tap works. Another reason would include some fresh characters, including Rosario Dawson as Nevada. Remember, everyone here is named for where they were born, a possible love interest for Tallahassee if the franchise continues, and newcomer Zoe Deutsch as the straight out-of-the-valley Madison. There's really not much plot here. Emma Stone's Wichita gets freaked out when Eisenberg's Columbus proposes to her, using a ring made from the Hope Diamond, just as her sister Little Rock gets into an argument with Tallahassee, and the two women leave. Oh, did I mention they're living in the White House? At any rate, Tallahassee, Wichita, Columbus, and the newfound Madison take off to find Little Rock, who they've heard is headed to Graceland with a hippie named Berkeley. Hijinks and super zombies, nicknamed T-800s, ensue until a final battle at a commune called Babylon, which is maybe a little too similar to the battle at the end of the first one. But thanks to a snappy script, easygoing acting, and a few hilarious new touches, Zombieland Double Tap is a must-see for those who dug the first one, and nearly that if you didn't. There's little you won't get by jumping in now. And make sure you stay through the credits. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Most supermarket eggs look pretty boring. Plain white chicken eggs, brown ones if you're lucky. However,
so there's a couple breeds that have blue eggs, and you can buy them at Whole Foods, actually.
Daniel Hanley, an evolutionary ecologist at Long Island University, who has a very specific reason for caring about the color of his eggs.
I'm always thinking about eggs. It's one of the tools that I use to understand ecological and evolutionary processes. So I study the function and evolution of natural colors, and the main system I use are birds' eggs.
Unlike white supermarket eggs, most bird eggs are colored various shades of bluish-green or brown due to two characteristic pigments birds produce. And by examining the egg colors of 634 species from around the world, Hanley and his colleagues found a curious pattern.
In the northern climates where it's the coolest, eggs are darker and browner, and those colors should give some type of adaptive benefit for those parents to be off of their eggs for a slightly longer period of time.
Darker eggs, in theory, would absorb more of the scarce sunlight in the Arctic, keeping the eggs warmer and allowing their parents to spend more time away from the nest looking for food. And indeed, when Hanley's team left 66 differently colored duck, quail, and chicken eggs in the sun, they found that the darker the eggs, the more slowly they lost their heat. The details and a world map of egg colors are in the journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. And if you're wondering then, are dark brown chicken eggs from some ancestral Arctic chicken?
No.
They just come from a different breed of hen, one that maybe prefers to buck the trend. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that Edward Meese gave a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Meese was serving as Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. During his speech, Meese encouraged bosses to spy on their employees in order to determine if they were using drugs. He said management also has to take responsibility for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms, parking lots, shipping and mail room areas, and even the nearby taverns if necessary as part of controlling this problem. He also advocated for drug testing of employees. Ronald Reagan had declared what he termed the war on drugs in 1982. Meese was outlining a plan to make the workplace a battlefront of that war. During his speech, he said, "The workplace is the strategic pass-through which almost all Americans move. Consequently, the workplace can be a choke point on this use or misuse of illegal drugs." After the speech, a spokesman for Meese assured the press that the Attorney General was not advocating for bosses to infringe on the civil liberties of their employees. Many workers and unions have disagreed with that assessment. Since 1987, drug testing by employers has risen more than 250%. In 1987, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that drug testing was a mandatory subject of bargaining. By all accounts, Reagan's war on drugs had little success in stopping drug use. In 2005, 82% of polled police and sheriffs called the war a failure. However, the war on drugs has handed a resounding victory to corporate special interests like drug testing companies and privatized prisons. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, the top Ukraine expert on the National Security Council, told House impeachment investigators on Tuesday that the White House transcript of that July phone call between Donald Trump and Ukraine's president omitted crucial words and phrases, and that his attempts to restore them failed. According to Vindman, the omissions included Trump's assertion that there were recordings of former Vice President Joe Biden discussing Ukraine corruption and an explicit mention by Ukraine's President Zelensky of Burisma Holdings, the energy company whose board employed Joe Biden's son Hunter. The hearings continue Wednesday with 2 witnesses, State Department officials Catherine Croft, an advisor on Ukraine issues, and Christopher Anderson, a former aide to Kurt Volker. According to his opening statement, Anderson will testify that John Bolton cautioned about the influence Rudy Giuliani had on U.S.-Ukraine policymaking. Catherine Croft is expected to tell impeachment investigators that she heard Trump repeatedly call Ukraine a corrupt country and that she received unexplained calls from lobbyist Robert Livingston urging the ouster of then-Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. House Democrats on Tuesday released their new impeachment resolution to be voted on Thursday, which outlines the rules and procedures governing the impeachment process moving forward. It sets up procedures for open hearings and the release of witness testimony by the House Intelligence Committee. The resolution explains that the House Intelligence Panel decides which hearings to hold, and it allows Chairman Adam Schiff to add rounds of uninterrupted questioning for himself and ranking Republican Devin Nunes, up to 45 minutes per side, as many times as necessary. Both Schiff and Nunes may yield their questioning time to staffers. Similarly, the resolution spells out that Republicans may request to call witnesses and issue subpoenas, but requests are subject to a veto by Schiff and committee Democrats, a similar arrangement to previous impeachment proceedings. A quick look away from our train wreck towards Britain's. Now it appears that the UK will head to the polls in December. Parliament came down Tuesday in favor of an early general election. In exchange, Prime Minister Boris Johnson agreed to shelve his Brexit deal for now. His Conservative Party is hoping the elections will give it a political majority, but it is a gamble. Former Prime Minister Theresa May pulled a similar move in 2017 and lost her party's slim majority. Also, voters in the UK are probably tired of voting for things. They've done it 3 times since 2015, and the latest moves could pave the way for a second referendum on Brexit. Back here at home, Donald Trump's impeachable offenses are dominating the news, so a Senate hearing Tuesday into the Boeing 737 MAX disasters didn't get the attention it should have. Exactly 1 year after a Lion Air flight from Jakarta, Indonesia plunged into the Java Sea, killing 189 people, senators grilled Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg on the failures of his company's best-selling plane. The hearings continue on Wednesday. CBS News ran this story.
I would walk before I was to get on a 737 MAX. I would walk.
One by one, senators took turn criticizing Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg.
You've not told us the whole truth, and these families are suffering because of it.
Members of those families were sitting just behind the Boeing chief and at the committee's request stood with pictures of their loved ones.
We are sorry, deeply and truly sorry. I think about you and your loved ones every day.
Muhlenberg admitted mistakes were made, but West Virginia Republican Shelley Moore Capito wanted to know why the 737 MAX wasn't grounded after the first crash in Indonesia 1 year ago today.
I think about that decision over and over every day. And if we knew everything back then that we know now, we would have made a different decision.
Okay. But some at Boeing may have known the plane had flaws nearly 2 years before the first crash. Messages show 2 test pilots complaining about the flight control system known as MCAS, one calling it egregious, saying it's running rampant in a flight simulator. That system was linked to both deadly crashes. Muhlenberg acknowledged knowing about the messages months before the second MAX crash, but says he only recently learned the details.
You're the CEO. The buck stops with you.
Roland Rayhorn and his wife Joan, who lost their 24-year-old daughter Angela in the Ethiopian Airlines crash, found Mullenberg's performance unsatisfying.
Do you believe Mr. Mullenberg when he says he's sorry?
I have to say no.
Why not?
Because if he's sorry, he would have resigned.
The mother of a Max victim confronted Mullenberg at the end of the hearing, saying, when you say you're sorry to someone, you're supposed to look at them. He stopped, looked her in the eyes, and said, I'm sorry.
And finally, some good news to a report. U.S. District Judge Myron Thompson issued a preliminary injunction on Tuesday temporarily blocking Alabama's near-total abortion ban from taking effect next month. He also called the law, part of a wave of new abortion restrictions by conservative states, clearly unconstitutional. The law would make performing an abortion a felony in almost all cases. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener-supported, which means I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on the donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Another chilly morning. We will have plenty of sunshine, a bit warmer than yesterday, should be in the low to mid-60s rather than in the upper 50s. Winds will continue out of the east-southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, though I should say they were much stronger yesterday than what they had been forecast. So much so that it toppled my pergola over because I did not have it secured well enough. How dare I? And let's see here. Overnight lows will be in the mid-30s tonight, maybe a little bit lower than that. Clear skies should prevail. Sunny tomorrow. Highs near the mid-60s again. Pollen is rated at none. The air quality index has inched up a couple of notches at 31 parts per million, though still in the good condition for those of us who are healthy. And the daytime UV index is moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is rising, at 30.23 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity has dropped precipitously to 20%. Wow, that's pretty darn dry. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Radio producers, that's my P-tape. Okay? Just so you have it on file. London is 53 degrees and fair. Paris is 51 and cloudy. Rome is 71 and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory. What? It's almost November. Kiev is 40 degrees and fair. Kabul is 59 and fair. Hong Kong is 73 and fair. Tokyo is 61 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 66 and fair. San Francisco, California is 52 and clear, except for all the smoke. Oh, and they do have a fire advisory to possibly evacuate hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Good luck traveling on the I-80. And New York is 60 degrees with fog. Oh, and by the way, you have a fog advisory in New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Michelle Nichols of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The United States told the UN Security Council that it opposed references to sexual and reproductive health and the safe termination of pregnancies, pitting Washington against Britain, France, South Africa, and others. While the United States joined its 14 Council counterparts to unanimously adopt a resolution on women, peace, and security, U.S. Ambassador Kelly Craft, another one of those vanity ambassadors, bought her way in. Said Washington was unhappy that the text mentioned previous resolutions that promote sexual and reproductive health. We cannot accept references to sexual and reproductive health, nor any references to safe termination of pregnancy or language that promote abortion or suggest a right to abortion, she said after the vote. The statement by Kraft was the latest in a string of moves by Donald Trump's administration against the promotion of sexual and reproductive health services by the United Nations as a cheap ploy to patronize their white evangelical extremist wing. The language promoting sexual and reproductive health is long agreed internationally, including resolutions adopted by the Security Council in 2009 and 2013, but those don't count because that was when the black president was running the show. Britain's UN ambassador Karen Pierce said sexual and reproductive health were a, quote, vital part of public services for women in all countries and a vital part of ensuring that women can play a truly equal role in the building of their countries. And Deputy French UN Ambassador Anne Guerguin said Council acknowledgement of sexual and reproductive health and rights was essential to helping victims of sexual violence globally, and obviously Trump is against that.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Patricia Zengurley of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to recognize the mass killings of Armenians a century ago as a genocide, a symbolic but historic vote that was instantly denounced by Turkey. The Democratic-controlled House voted 405-11 in favor of a resolution asserting that it is U.S. policy to commemorate as genocide the killing of 1.5 million Armenians by the Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1923. The Ottoman Empire was centered in present-day Turkey. The vote marked the first time in 35 years that such legislation was considered in the full House, underscoring widespread frustration in Congress with the Turkish government from both Democrats and Donald Trump's fellow Republicans. Shortly after the Armenian genocide vote, House lawmakers from both parties also overwhelmingly backed legislation calling on Trump to impose sanctions on Turkey over its offensive in northern Syria, another action likely to inflame relations with NATO ally Turkey. Well, good. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.